Welcome to the second episode of Diem Cafe. My name is Manuela Collarella. I'm the coordinator of the Diem25 Dublin DSC. As Dublin DSC, we are hosting a series of episodes, live streamed episodes called Diem Cafe, which are a sort of informal conversation with Diem members from different countries to see how this current crisis is going on in the different countries, how is the situation with the healthcare crisis, how is the impact of the economy in the different countries, and what is the areas of social protection that have been not properly covered by different countries, by different governments. Basically, what we advocate is for a joint recovery, a more solidaristic Europe, and that's our way to start from this, trying to join Europeans from the grassroots. So we are here today with Patrizia Pozzo from the Diem25 National Collective. She's in the communication task. We also have Andrea Serra from the National Collective from Diem25 Italy as well. He's an expert in welfare and working rights. And we have Janina Urban. She's an economist. She lives in Cologne in Germany and is part of the Germany National Collective of Diem25 as well. She's an economist and works in the field of critical economic science and education. So welcome everybody. I'm very happy to have all of you today. A lot of company today, and let's start our conversation. So let's start from Germany. How is the situation there, Janina, at the moment? How things are going on?
Yeah. So the restrictions were eased last week, most of them, which means that the restaurants were opened again under certain distance restrictions. The supermarket had been opened throughout, and also schools and childcare partly reopened, which is kind of a matter for some criticism, because some parents most parents get really strained by the double occupation they now have. But the mood is a bit more optimistic, I'd say. People are happy that it's kind of easing. At the same time, you kind of have the danger that people are like overly or blind to that the virus is still there. So this is kind of the situation here. But the weather is extremely hot, so everyone is a bit, I don't know, in a better mood maybe than you would usually expect.
Yeah, we have the same here in Dublin. We expect 29 degrees, which for Dublin is really a moment. So everybody is willing to go outside, and there's this double feeling of excitement for a new phase and fear of everything will go in the good direction. It's very ambivalent feeling, I think, at the moment for all Europe, to see what will happen. And how's going in Italy, Patrizia?
Hi everybody. First of all, I want to thank you for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here now. Well, very interesting question, because would be good to know. I mean, the mood is changing every day, and it depends on how many different things which is happening every day in Italy. Basically, we can say that our country is divided in two. It means there is a very different situation from north of Italy and south and central of the country. It seems to be like two different countries, actually, in terms of everything, on how was the approach of the sanitary emergency and how is the approach of the new incoming phase, or we can call rebirth, in a certain sense. But of course, there is a generally positive, because we want to be also positive. We have to find out a definitely way to come up of this situation. Now also the numbers seem to be more comfortable. But for example, that's a good point, because I don't like to talk about numbers, because we can say, we could tell how many deaths we had in our country, but the number are really relatives on two elements. The first one is the number of swabs we could have done. And the second one is how we can track the injections, and we still have to do that. So all the numbers we can give are not so good because of these two important elements. And we do.
That's a general problem in all Europe about the comparing data, because tests are not validated, have been prepared very, very fast, with not all the usual parameters that you normally have for laboratory tests. So they have high numbers of false positive. Now also the blood test that they are doing now seems to have the same problem, and also the capacity of testing from country to the country is not the same. So
I keep
general idea, but a very, very general idea at the moment. Yes.
Yesterday, for example, one of our most important Italian journalists, in his live night talk, demonstrate how tests in Italy can be wrong 1/3. So you can imagine.
Yeah, no.
It's something that can completely change all the numbers we had till now. So we live in a surreal climate, we can say. I don't know Germany, Janina.
Well, actually, I would still hope to think that we can like look at the numbers, because right now, like, people who come to doubt those numbers come from like those kind of those conspiracy theory side, and like there's one epidemiologist, I hope I pronounced that right, who has been quite present in the media, and people have been listening to him. He had a podcast and kind of explain what are the things that you can know, the things that you can't know, and then it's still something different what they can tell you from virology, depending on how, like, what economic and political decision can be made on that, and if you want to be more precautionary, what's the economic cost, etc. So and many people found that quite helpful, because, well, not knowing so much about virology before. So but then he got quite attacked from certain people that he was like it was mainstream media. So I think there is a problem with the numbers that I come to read about in Germany, that is related to how many people died, because the number is very low in Germany. And I'm trying to, and this hasn't changed. So there were not, people who died were not tested, and they're not changing that right now. So the number stays really low, and that's a part that we don't really know. And also we don't know how many people are infected, because it's not very much tested. But I think that should be an approach, that many more people should be tested to really have an idea of how many people are affected, because this virus is bad for your health. That is very, very certain, I think. Yeah.
Yes, no, and this comes to my next question for you guys about how was the, in general, on a general level, the impact on the epidemic. Let's do a little bit of recap for the respective country. How was the impact of the epidemic in Italy and Germany, both on the health side and the economic impact? Well, we know that, of course, everybody knows in Italy that now in Europe that Italy has been the most affected, the first. Probably we also show to the others what was going on. So, Patrizia, what's your opinion on that? How the things went on in Italy?
Yes, as you just said, Italy was the first European country to approach this coronavirus, and also the first one to decided to lock down. We did the complete lockdown as the first country. And then France decided to move in the same direction, then Spain and many others.
There was also moments where all Europe was looking at Italy like Italy were a little bit paranoid. You remember that at the beginning?
Yes, and then suddenly they all decided to follow what's Italy done at the end. Yeah, that's true.
There was for me as an Italian living abroad was a very weird moment, because it's, of course, you see, you read the Italian press as well. You have an insight also of your original country, and it was very weird being abroad to see what was going on in Italy, and to see all the other countries not realizing that this was serious. And it was like, an horror movie when there is a character that tries to warn all the others and nobody believes him. That was the feeling that I had living abroad. I was talking to all my friends and saying, guys, this is not a joke. It's not Italians, they are dramatic. This is serious. But there was a few days where it was hard to make this, to make other people believe this. Yeah.
Following our point, I would like to underline an interesting and important, in my opinion, point, especially in the first part of the pandemic crisis in Italy. Of course, I'm talking about my country. We could say that we all discover the public health. And we can say that at the end, it worked. I mean, it worked and it's still working. Of course, we can do better. Of course, we can always do better. But generally speaking, we reacted in a good way, with a big sense of solidarity from all the nation and not only our nation, because after a few weeks we receive some help from different countries from Europe and also not from I could say from Cuba or something. Yeah, so I mean, was very, very interesting also understand and see this how many people now wanted to give out us a hand. Now, let me say also an important thing. At the first part of the crisis, we had a completely lockdown. During this first part of the lockdown, probably Andrea can help me, every week our Prime Minister did a press release with always new way of approaching and new way of a new indication for the Italian people. But we are still in the situation to understand what exactly is happening, because an important part of the help the government announced and in a certain sense have insured us, we still receive them. We still have to receive a quite big part of this important help, especially in
that's I think one of the worst issues at the moment, that the economy, wages, the emergency benefit that have been put in place by the Italian government in many regions have not been paid yet. But we will go there on the social measure a little bit later. But in general, what's your take about how things have been managed so far?
Once more, it depends. Generally speaking, I can say, in my opinion, we face quite good. Of course, once more, it depends from north from south, because the country, as I told before, has been divided in two parts. In all efforts, but absolutely there was a country who reacted in quite a good way in terms of assistance, of decrease. Not all the categories receive immediate help, and of course there are some categories which are still completely forgotten. I refer to migrants, sex workers, a part of laborers completely forgotten. But I also can say that probably could also difficult to help everyone at the same time in the same way. So we also have to say that, to be completely honest. Yes.
Janina, what's your take about Germany? How the emergency worked there and how it was managed?
So we had this situation that you were saying, that this kind of reluctance to recognize that the virus is spreading, and I mean we knew that it was in China and that we do have trade relations to this country, and that it sooner or later would come here, and it was very kind of dawnful, because we had even Carnival was celebrated here. So that was in that was in February, so 20th of February. So that is when already it was known that it's spreading also to Europe, and it was still not cancelled. And that was the moment that I got really nervous, because I have to do with elderly people, and I didn't want to put them at risk. So was already taking it more seriously while it was outside, not much visible. The people were still like, drinking the wine. It's like, okay, this cannot be. But the interesting part was that you have, well, as Germany is federated, and health is a task which is done by or accepted by the states. There was a kind of a competition between the states in regulating this health crisis, and interestingly, it's also about like two candidates which want to be the next chancellor of Germany, and both areas, North Rhine-Westphalia and Bavaria, have been hit quite hard, because in North Rhine-Westphalia, the virus actually did spread in a carnival party, and in Bavaria, I don't know about the origins there, but I think it was related to business contacts. So there were Bavaria was like playing the strong man there, and putting even the state of emergency, and like being quite strict on it. And North Rhine-Westphalia was more for the liberal part, where that's North Rhine-Westphalia, that's where I live in Cologne, was more liberal in that sense that that it was like in that sense open still, that you would go out for running, for having a walk, and that kind of stuff. So there have been different models. I don't even think that would be so bad that you have different states trying out different measures, so you have a comparison afterwards. But it was like claimed as, federalism is not working. I wouldn't necessarily see it that way. And now where things are lifting up, it's the same kind of thing. So some go very run into opening everything, some states, and others are a bit more cautious. So, but on a general note, I mean, we will probably come to this, but Germany has basically subsidized its whole economy out of this crisis. So just like this time, it was much stronger than compared to the last crisis in 2008, from the financial crisis. They've kind of learned the lessons to just give out money and stabilize whatever you can, so that growth comes back when the virus is over. But that's the fact, a very I would say egoist kind of way, because we had sufficient capacities. Also the intensive care units, we had sufficient. There was 1/3 left unused, and that could have been, it could have been a part where you really show that we're we're all together in this. But this unfortunately didn't happen. So yeah, I'm not so happy with it.
To my next question, that of course Italy and Germany are on the two different sides of the austerity issue.
Yeah,
and it will be interesting also to note how this being on this different position had an impact on the capacity of the different country to react to the emergency. Andrea, what's your take on it? Because
I think that lockdown is increasing inequality. Some of the austerity policies that are hitting Italy since 2008, but also some of the neoliberalism ideology. At the very beginning of the crisis, people said lockdown was putting everyone on the same level, the rich and the poor. And I think it was bullshit. The crisis showed us inequality we already had, from a different point of view. Who has lost their job and who has unemployed people, for example, who has social security and who hasn't, who has a big apartment and who has a small one, who has an old person at home and who hasn't, and so on. And during this period, it has been clear how austerity measures has impacted, for example, for the public health system, where the cut-off costs are more evident. And this what happened in Lombardy region, severely affected by the pandemic, but this region in the last decades outsourced it in favor of health private sector as austerity and neoliberalism imposed. In Lombardy, in Italy, we have lack of structure to assist seeker. We can also consider that Italy was a producer of medical masks. You remember that in April, half of the world, Italy too, seemed to be dependent from Korea and Japan. Now we are forced to import masks or asked to some Italian firms to produce masks. We cut labs for tests. Another example. Italy had firms for the production of chemical reagents that now is using for epidemiological tests. Neither we produce machine for tests anymore. So we haven't masks, few labs, we haven't reagents, we haven't machines. Every machines we buy from Germany, for example, has its own reagents. Adding up all, it's clear that for Italy it was difficult and it will be difficult to do what World Organization asks, that is to do tests more and more. So in this situation we can take care of seekers and take care about the population.
Yeah, no, definitely. This in particular, I think it's particularly interesting to see the PPE issue, the personal protection, the mask and so on, because it was a problem that every country had, more or less. Here in Ireland as well, the government had to buy with special flight from China. Like in Italy, there was the issue that these masks were not compliant with quality standards. Yeah. So it happened in many countries, especially those affected from austerity, because what happened was the countries that were in a better place had pandemic plans implemented. Our pandemic plan in Italy and in Ireland as well was not that implemented, and PPE were not stocked in advance in case of an emergency. So there was this rush from many countries, and in my opinion, at European level, it is the exact demonstration of what didn't work. Because there was this rush to stab each other on the back, to run to China, and to buy a stock of masks before the others. There is quite, it's not exactly the definition of cooperation and solidarity in the middle of an emergency. Then it came after a few weeks, the coordination. But the first moment was a very, very bad show, I think, from the different European countries.
I agree with you.
Janina, you wanted to say.
Yeah. No, there was as I said, there's ministers of the different state, and the one of Bavaria, Söder, like flew in a huge amount of masks, you know, and made pictures, you know, photos to show it to the media, to be the one first got those masks, because they weren't there. And this is kind of, that's the thing, like, if, people said, okay, how can industrialized country like Germany not be able to produce face masks. But yeah, and the bad thing was that that the protection, which I found very really kind of calling the attention that people who had to work in like the systemic or systemic relevant jobs, let's so to say, in the supermarkets, they were really badly protected in the beginning. So they didn't have a protection shield in front of them because it's only a plastic thing, but that took like, I don't know, in Germany also took like 3 weeks or so until those were installed. And the facial masks, they were only introduced, I think, like 3 weeks ago. So we were really slow to take, measures that like precautionary measures. So I think that's something that shows us like that we do not think in this precautionary terms, that our economies are not made for or don't run in a logic that you're able to protect vulnerable people. And especially the ones, workers who were badly protected in this case, all the way through. Still,
Patrizia,
let me add about this point one more thing. At the beginning, especially at the beginning in Italy, I don't know if in Germany too. Also, our doctors and our medical world were not well protected. Italy is one of the countries with the number of deaths also in the medical world, because they were helped others without anything. You can imagine.
Let me stress the point that again, this is a common issue, and that's interesting. Diem Cafe is interesting because Emma in the previous episode was saying the same thing about France. Here in Ireland, we had the same issue. Most of the infection are in the frontline workers in the hospital. We had the same issue in France, in Ireland, and in Italy about nursing home for the elderly. There are things that are structural to this kind of emergency, of course, and it's nobody's fault. But the lack of protection, the lack of planning, the lack of organization, which we see it is worst in the country that were more affected by austerity and where the healthcare system was weakened by austerity. This structural element became a disaster. So there's a connection between these two things, definitely. And in terms of the supply for the PPA, one reflection that had during these weeks was that probably now we should think better. I am for open borders, and I definitely don't want to go back to national countries and borders and stuff, but maybe to outsource the supply of a primary good or whatever to one unique area for all the globe. That was China, the supplier for this kind of material. Not exactly diversifying. Janina, as an economist, diversifying is the first thing that they teach you about investments. But we rely for a lot of very, very basic goods from one supplier at global level. Is it a wise strategy?
Well, that would lead us into a discussion about how you kind of regulate those trade relations. I mean, it's a common topic though, also by the European Union, and I also observe that some of this, this turning inwards when there's something like the virus, and being more protective and even turning more nationalist is also something, you know, but I see is problematic. Why should we? And I mean, like, why should we distrust China selling on those masks? I wouldn't. I think there might be areas where you could, you know, say, well, we want that produced. Let's say we want our, I don't know, zucchinis. We prefer them to be produced. We want our a bicycle to be produced here, so we have a good economy. I don't necessarily think we would have to talk about it in more detail, which things are like should be produced here and others somewhere else. Because that is being used, you know, it's like being used to say, okay, and now we want to close our borders, and and that's what the European Union does, and like the 5G, the internet, all the
No,
I don't want to say that you're doing that, but it goes like sometimes into the same direction, and you kind of have to have like a good discussion on that. I think in Europe, how much, what do you produce actually in this, and can you not like use the structures that you have in Europe better to equalize capacities and not be competing against each other, and having forcing down whole industries to move somewhere else? That's something definitely that needs to be talked about.
It's about being sustainable. Not it's not about closing border, but thinking about a model that is more sustainable for everybody and doesn't leave you unprotected in case of emergency. That would be a little better. Talking about this, going specifically on the economic side, how was the impact of this crisis on the economy of your respective countries? Andrea, how is the employment doing? How is the economy situation at the general level now?
Very bad, especially for talking about the world of work. We divided the world of work in Italy to decide which companies must close the production. We have divided workers between essential workers, health system, agriculture, food, etc., and non-essential workers, school, for example, unfortunately. And I had another category, essential workers, but for the profits. And this is one of the reasons why we had a large number of that in Lombardy, for example, because too many workers were still working as Confindustria, the organization of employer, imposed to us, imposed to our nation. In Italy, we still have a 900th century welfare system. So thought for men, not for women, for fixed workers, less for flexible ones, for workers of some sector, for example, factory, and not a universal system. So now we have a crazy amount of tools not covering the entire world of work. We have a so-called reddito di cittadinanza, a sort of basic income that is more similar to a workfare tools. The beneficiary must train or accept works, for example. We have a social insurance for unemployment for those who lost their job. Then we have a series of different forms of social insurance in case of crisis, during which people don't lose their job, but they can't work, as for coronavirus pandemic, for example. Almost every sector has his own system and only for firms with more than 5 employees. For the smaller firms, we have the so-called exception, and the government gives money for these workers. But not all workers has these rights. Think about, for example, job on collar, the rider, the migrants who are irregular staying in our country, and also autonomous worker. So it's very we have divided the world of work, increasing the inequality that I said before.
But the general, what are the most impacted sector in the economy in Italy at the moment? I suppose hospitality and tourism.
Exactly. The hospitality,
commerce.
Don't forget that the Italian fashion style is famous all around the world. It's completely stopped.
Basically, it seems like a trivial thing, but the fashion chain lost one season. It's a huge damage.
Not only one, and they lost in economic numbers are is getting higher and higher and higher. And the demonstration of that is that the big name, like for example Armani or this big name, in order to save the possible, move their headquarters from the other parts of Europe, again coming back again in Italy. To give a
sense of reaction. Sorry, Andrea, I interrupt you. You were talking about the tourism and hospitality.
Yes, because the hospitality has been the first sector hit by the crisis, and I think it is the last. It will be the last sector that can move on after this crisis. Think about you in this moment. How many people are ready to go in a hotel or in a restaurant? And when I have to choose my place where I would like to spend my holiday, I choose the place. Think about medical center or how many infected those region or those place had in this period. So it's very hard. And in tourism sector there is a new fight against the country. Germany with Austria against Italy and Russian alliance to have more tourists in our country. There is a very geopolitical issues in this moment.
And also we have to remind that in Italy the food sector is like the symbol of the small enterprises, the family enterprises, and it's we have a viewer that wrote a message about small enterprises are destroyed. That we also Italian economic issue is basically made by small and medium enterprises, and that they are suffering everywhere. That the part of economy that is more suffering. What was the impact on Germany, Janina?
So as I already said, that this time the German government spent a lot to subsidize or to support all kinds of businesses. So small and medium-sized, but also freelancers were able to get quite a lot. It took a while. My flatmate is a musician, a music teacher, and it took a while until they recognized that what he does is kind of a service, and that he cannot, and that he can not only receive money for things he spends, like, I don't know, let's say a computer or so, but that's actually a service. It took them, like, I think 1.5 months until they realized that they would just have to give them the money and not making up for expenses, because there are none. It's just a service that has been falling out. So there were some difficulties in that, but on a general term, I heard that it was quite easy this time for people to get support. So they would, I hope I'm right, receive up to 2,000 euro, a freelancer, but they would have to show in the end that they were able, that they had those losses. So there is a part that they might have to pay back in the end, and this counts for 3 months. Small and medium-sized enterprises have been supported, also quite a lot. And if you had employees up to 5 employees, you would get up to 3,000 euro a month. But then you had all the bailouts as well. German company bailouts in the car rental sector, airplanes, aircraft sector, so Condor, Lufthansa, and another one received state money, and also some car suppliers. So those, you basically subsidize the German industrial model, which, well, from an economic point of view, this still like enlarges the inequalities that you have in the Eurozone, because like they can keep up the capacities, and if the economy turns back on, they still have the people and can run the businesses. So I think the inequality has, in this in the European sense, has kind of increased a lot. But we had there's actually the hospitality sector was hit quite a bit, nevertheless, and there were like 2 scandals related to migrant work. One was in like meat factories, where people were really badly or not protected, and so the virus could spread really quickly. And no one was there for them to help them in this situation, tell them kind of what to do. This is a sector which has huge problems, like the working hours are way too long. It's super unregulated. So people are really being highly exploited in this sector. And Germany is a large meat consumer still. So, and the other sector was in the harvest area, the asparagus, which is like kind of the holy grail for Germans in May. There were not any workers because the borders were closed, and people kind of realized, okay, that's what we rely on usually, that, we receive a lot of cheap labor from somewhere else, and who will bring us our asparagus? And in the end, they flew people to Germany to make the harvest. So I think it's just kind of same, I don't know, a similarity maybe to Italy, that actually there's some sectors which are quite, almost informal. They have very little workers protection as well, taken together with some of the the logistics sector, which is also a horror in Germany, is kind of the same, that some sectors, service sectors, really suffer a lot. They receive low wages, but this is the model that Germany kind of thrives on, on the shoulders of many workers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me say that the logistics sector is hell everywhere. That's kind of a universal law. I used to work in a health and safety consultant studio. My last job, I changed a lot of jobs when I was in Italy, thanks to the nice stability of Italian job market. And the last one was in a health and safety studio. And so I used to see the statistics about workers, and the workers in logistics, the drivers, have the highest percentage of death on the workplace and of different health issues. It's a very nightmare sector, and it's going to be worse with this kind of online commerce, especially monopolized by big players that tend to keep the price of the services lower and lower possible. So talking about the agriculture sector, that's another issue that we have in common about the thing about the seasonal workers. It happened in Ireland as well. In the middle of the crisis, a particular company who is specialized in cultivating strawberries imported with a special flight from Bulgaria workers to do the harvesting, which created a lot of discussion, a lot of controversy, because everybody was restricted. So many complain about this special treatment, let's say, for a specific company, which is also in very good relations with the government. And in general, maybe we should talk about how this sort of chain of exploitment between different countries, how we take advantage of how employers take advantage of European inequality to take a margin on that. And in Italy, there was this big
strike
for the strike. Do you want to tell about that a little bit?
Well, in our agricultural sector, we have a situation of total exploitation of the workers, especially for workers who comes from Africa. And in this period, they have the same problems we are talking about. No masks, no security for in the workplace, and etc. Obviously, for their rights and the general situation in which they work. So we had strike from the migrant workers in agriculture. It was a huge strike and a very important historical strike, I think, and we are waiting from this government. I think you can remember what the policies that Salvini has introduced in our country about the fighting illegal migration. That we have also the law decided by Salvini. This government didn't change it, and now we are waiting for an solution for this kind of work. There are our brothers, no? Finally, so it's a very embarrassing situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me add that this we are living. We are coming out from the sanitary emergency, but we are in the full economics and social one.
Exactly.
And economics and social one are going parallel, influencing each other, and creating always more inequalities in all categories. And the point is that that apart what the announcement of the government at the moment, the reality, the truth is that we still don't know, and we still don't have important measures to face them. That's the point.
Yeah. We have also a question from one viewer. What do you think? Do you agree with the measure taken by the government? So they're asking to Italian Diemers, so what's your opinion? So I think you just answered that it's not enough. What has been done is not enough, and what has been done is not being implemented.
Yes, no, in my opinion, absolutely they are not enough. They didn't cover all the categories. They completely left alone some categories. And I think we do need, as soon as possible, immediate answers. You know, I suppose we can be all agreed that in this pandemic crisis, what was missing is a common European strategy. I'm quite sure we can say that it wasn't that one. But now I can also, in my opinion, I can also say that in my country, there wasn't a real strategy good for all parts of countries. That's why every single region tried to create their own one, and that's why we had so many differences from region by region, and these differences we are still living them. In these days, there is a great discussion, great debate on how, for example, Veneto, which is really close to Lombardia, is coming up well in all sense, in an economics one, in sanitary one, and the nearest Lombardia is still in crisis. So yeah, Andrea can be more precise than me. I don't know what he thinks about that, but Andrea, I still feel a great missing.
Let me add that there was also an element of conflict. Janina was mentioning before the model of federalism, and that maybe someone has put that on discussion or not in Germany. In Italy, there's been this element of conflict between the central government and the different region, because also in many regions they are now on a different political side. And this has influenced also the management of the emergency, because the government was saying one thing, the region wanted to do another thing. The region were not communicating the numbers of what was going on really because that's just a little explanation for non-Italians. Some years ago, there was a change on the model of local administration in Italy, and the healthcare and many other areas were demanded to the local regions. So the local regions were those one who had, let's say, the management of the emergency at local level. And this created a conflict, because there was a moment where the local administration were, especially those that were more in difficulty, were not exactly transparent in communicating what was going on. Then this passed. This was a moment. But there was also a political element of conflict between the government and the regions on how things were going on. Andrea, what's your take on in general on the government measures?
I think that we are the country of the conflicts, okay, and and we are also a conflict between central government and regional government. I think that the government did well in the first part. We have divided this pandemic in some phases. Okay, in the first part, I think government did well. But we have to consider what I said before and what Confindustria, the employer association, did for as lobbying to not to stop the production, etc. In this situation, now the government, I think, are showing is weak. For example, we forgotten totally the sector of school, that it means children, that it means employers, that it means families.
Let me say that it means women.
Yes,
absolutely. Yes. Manuela, look, in health sector, in school sector, in Italy, but generally speaking, in Europe, we have the majority of women that works. So I think that children and women are the weakest part of this pandemic. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and also putting the people in condition to go back to have to go back to work without thinking about what to do with the children, put the women in a more difficult situation, because let's say the family care work, we can debate how much is right or not, but the reality is in our society is still on women's shoulders most of the time. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of the crisis, the women will have to decide if leave work, mm-hmm, or stay at home with the children if they cannot afford private solutions. So that's, and we are, and still Italy, but also Ireland has a very low percentage of women in the workforce. So mm-hmm.
It's the same actually in Germany, that this part on the schools and child daycare mm-hmm. Are the ones where it was kind of unclear how people should then manage mm-hmm. to do what they are ordered to do, in the sense to go back to work. So it's I think this crisis has shown or is still showing like which parts are the invisible ones, and you think they'd be running, and unfortunately still now, like much of the problems, the suffering, or the difficulty that are in those sectors cannot be managed in a way that they have a common voice that should be heard, I think. And I mean, and also the health sector, like what time would they have to now also organize? I hope that unions will do their part to support some more wage negotiations in that, because they shouldn't be also now organized it all by themselves. It should not by now be evident that there's the good reasons for wages to rise in that sectors. But I'm curious what will happen. Mm-hmm. Actually, the largest union, services union in Germany, had been preparing for like a renegotiation of like many contracts, and they actually had been planning to use that to increase wages by quite a bit. But then the crisis hit, and now you have the other side saying, but we're in a economic crisis, so you can't really increase wages. So I'm quite curious what will happen, but it's also each day there's like new news. It's kind of difficult to also you always have to rethink what's now the best demand that you can make to get something out of this crisis as well.
Now, I think the union point, it's very interesting. And it's an interesting point, the fact that the German unions and France unions recently made a joint statement about the recovery fund, asking for more money, asking for an harmonization of the fiscal policy in Europe, making a very interesting demand. Of course, as at Diem25, we think that the recovery fund is not enough. That we have our position, our suggestion for a recovery plan. There is about the ECB Eurobond and other measures. But still, historically speaking, I think this is the first time that some national unions go beyond their borders and start to see, okay, what my country can do for me. It depends also from what this discussion, how this discussion will end up at the European level. And I think it's a switching point, and we as a civil society, we should push at that at our different national level, saying that that's the direction. We need to have a pan-European perspective, because, of course, I agree with Patrizia, Andrea analysis. What the Italian government is doing is not enough. What the Irish government is doing is not enough. But also, of course, every government has a certain margin of political choice to do. But what a government can do in these days in Europe depend a lot from that level. And slowly this awareness is going around, is going around, and even in the union sector, and it's
even in the corporate sector. I looked it up. Even the German Industrial Association, together with the French and the Italian one, also won the side on supporting Eurobonds. So right now, I mean, nationalism also seems to be, well, is a threat to them. But so that should make workers stronger, I hope, as well, transnationally. Yeah.
We have a question for you, Janina. What do you think of the decision of the Court of Karlsruhe, declaring the quantitative easing unacceptable?
Yeah. So it was actually an interesting dynamic. So the ones that filed the lawsuit are very right-wing. So it's not it's the second or even third lawsuit they file against all of those measures on stabilizing the Eurozone, and actually this suit kind of took the framing or the argument, the ones that were suing that kind of took it as how do you say, as the judgment. That was, well, quite telling, I think. But it had an interesting dynamic, and I'm not sure, but it could have led to the situation that Merkel decided, okay, we cannot let the ECB do everything for Europe and for the Eurozone, but we have to also have a fiscal component, and that's maybe even helped to be stronger on the recovery plan together with Macron. I think that could have been a dynamic. So I'm a bit happy that it kind of back shot at the right wing that they did that. And as I have heard from the professional side, like on the lawyer side, they would think that the ECB is able to have their argumentation why it's within their mandate, and that will not create bigger problems. It could, though, you know, if there's more arguments on the other side, it could actually also be destabilizing. Yeah, still.
That brings me to our last question. That is about what's the perception in your respective countries about this discussion about a European recovery plan. That is, some say it should be the recovery fund, some saying we are talking more about the Eurobonds. But in general, what is the perception about this ongoing debate at European level? Because what we are told sometimes, there is this nationalistic division, which I don't believe, between the frugal countries on one side that are all, whose public opinion is all on one side, and the austerity, let's say the austerity countries whose public opinion is all on the other side. I would like to go a little bit beyond this simplified vision. And Janina, what do you say?
Yeah, I have to stress that this time, like compared maybe to the time of the Euro crisis, that although the same kind of pictures emerge in some media outlets, you know, like lazy whatever from South Europe, and that brought many of us in a total rage, you know, it's like why again? Yeah, but actually there was a survey on that exact questions. Would you be for Eurobonds or Corona bonds in that situation? And the majority of people in Germany were for it. So they were seeing that it's necessary, although Merkel has always been saying, you know, that she wouldn't do that. But public opinion has shifted quite a lot, because we see that it's not sustainable to let other people hang, and it's also economically totally stupid to do that. And
why? Tell us why it's very stupid.
Well, there's the argument that that you cannot. Well, first, the economic argument that you cannot have a common currency, and don't have any stabilizers, and don't have any active fiscal role to you know, adjust to the imbalances that do arise when you have that currency. From the other point of view, it's also Germany has already been losing out and just exporting cars to China, while the euro area has been economically weakened and doesn't, you know, buy German cars anymore. But that's it's still like a very true argument. So it's not, and this is also, I think, why now the capital side, the German industry association is for more integration as opposed to some years ago. So the discourse has actually kind of shifted, and now it's mostly about, you know, not breaking your own words. And I don't know, be very close friends with some of the very conservative thinkers. Yeah, it's
more about standing your point than the realistic situation.
Yeah, and kind of, you know, defending the old model that you have to be fiscally so strict to survive in this common currency. But as we know, currency have the advantage that you can actually go into more fiscal debt, as all mature economies like the United States, like Japan, etc. have. So that's a possibility that Europe is just, for political will, not using. So that's a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Diem's position is, quite a bit as well. Yeah.
Patrizia, Andrea, what's your take on it? What is the current Italian debate about this European debate? What's the feeling?
Andrea, you wanna?
Yeah, it's simply, in my point of view, because people want to know how Europe can help people. We must decide if we want Europe based on dumping or solidarity. Social dumping based on lower rights or lower salary for workers, fiscal dumping with tax havens or as our Holland, and so on.
And
I think
I have to say, and
I don't know. I'm polite.
We have to be honest about. I'm very grateful to the country that welcomed me, but financial injustice is a luxury that the post-pandemic world cannot afford, in my opinion, anymore. Sorry, I interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I'm finished. I think that Eurobonds or recovery fund could introduce a share risk principle that in our economy, in our European economy. Let me say just another issue. We have to decide what kind of Europe we want for the future, but I think we have to decide if we want to look for the future to Bolsonaro, Trump, Johnson, Erdogan way. If you want to look at the Merkel, Macron, or von der Leyen way, and if we want to look in international, in a global point of view, and I think that we have to build together what we say the third space, okay, the alternative on this two side of the same coin. And I think, let me say, if we are in Diem house, that the international progressive that we launched in recently launched is could be a very important tools for us, and I think for workers, for women, and for who to fight all together, internationally speaking.
Let me also add that in Italy, the general sentiment, the majority of people is still trusting an idea of European Union, which can help each country at their best. That's an important sign, I think, especially in this particular moment of crisis.
Yeah, no, it's from the Irish side, we are here in a very strange moment, because now the government is starting to slowly sending the message that now it's the time to start to pay the bill of all this.
Yeah.
And we cannot go on borrowing anymore, which is a very ambivalent position from the Irish government, because the Irish government co-signed the letter of the 13 countries asking for Eurobonds at the beginning of this discussion. So they are kind of taking two positions at the same time. And also the Irish media and there was not really a debate that the government didn't claim this position that had taken signing that letter. So it's like, okay, if it goes well, we are on the Eurobond side. But in the meantime, we start to say to our public opinion that we probably we need to prepare ourselves to pay the bill of this, because our book must stay in balance and we cannot go on borrowing forever. So that's that austerity narrative coming back slowly. Still, and then when the emergency is not finished, but already preparing, the ground for that. So I think we really, really need to push at the international level against this. There's no alternative narrative once again coming back.
There's one strand, like all the Green New Deals have in common. The Green New Deal, which has been proposed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the United States, the one already proposed in 2007 or 2008 by some British ecologists and economists, and also right now the Green New Deal that Diem is launching, not the von der Leyen New Deal, Green Deal, that says we can afford what we want to do. So we are actually, internationally speaking, the economically most relevant, one of the most relevant countries, and it's just it's a possibility, is something that lies in our possibilities if we don't let the governments restrained or means that they're ours. And we need, I mean, it's crazy that now all that money has been spent on something, is quite useless, just to prolong some credit lines and to do some spending. But it shows that there is money, and you could exactly take that amount and even make more of that and put this into a real a Green New Deal. And that means like a real introducing different selection mechanisms that make this economy more socially responsible and also more ecological. So I hope that I'm not 100% sure if we've got that message through by now, but we should be the ones calling it, singing it, because we need it right now. It's a reformist kind of thinking, but let's not believe the story that there is not enough money for what we need to do.
I think we should only remember about the time when we created as Europe, which is quite, was an historical thing, where we created public childcare, public healthcare, public transport, national infrastructure, where utilities were public owned. It was a matter of political will. It was a matter of political will. There was a time when people didn't think that there was not alternative, that there are different models, different position or discussion about how this should be structured. There is the Nordic model, the German model, the Italian, the France. But as Europe, we have a common ground of idea that there was a time where this ground, these basics were guaranteed for all. And at the time, there was not this idea that there was no alternative. So we should recover that spirit a little bit in a new, more green way.
Right.
We should remember where we come from, probably, all together. So thank you very much to everybody. I think we finished this discussion very well with a bit of hope and with the awareness of all the work that we need to do on our local level. But we are in Diem for this. So thank you
very much.
To all of you.
Manuela, for having organized this Diem Cafe.
Yes.
And let's do this again.
Come back soon in Italy, Manuela.
Yeah. Well, if there were flights, very happy to hug all of you and my family as well. We'll see what happens. Bye bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Have a nice afternoon.
See you soon.